Hello and welcome to Your Health Reclaimed. This is your host, Dr. PND. I'm sorry, guys, we have been a little absent for the last few weeks, but we're back on schedule with a whole bunch of podcasts. So today we're going to continue on a very important topic and one that I deal with on a daily basis with all of my patients and clients, and that is gut health. I know this is a topic that has been drilled before many times and currently still is by many great experts out there. But the reason I feel very compelled to speak about that today is that it's an extremely important topic and something that has not been addressed, and things are getting worse. They're not getting any better in that field. And I believe that we need to keep talking about it and keep teaching and educating until things become better and become to be addressed. Because, as I said before, it is a very pressing issue, and 95% or more of the patients that I work with, they do have substantial gastrointestinal GI issues. So today we're going to discuss the 12 factors that cause gastrointestinal inflammation, and the 12 things that needs to be addressed and done to be able to reverse that and help those issues. So let's go ahead and begin just a little bit of a primer on gut health. As I previously discussed, the gut microbiome influences pretty much every aspect of our health. However, gut inflammation is also a crucial determinant of intestinal and whole body health as well. So let's go and learn how various diet and lifestyle factors cause gastrointestinal inflammation, the health consequences of a chronically inflamed gut, and practical strategies to alleviate inflammation and to restore gut health ultimately. So gut inflammation can contribute to development of a wide range of serious conditions like type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's, MS, cardiovascular disease, and many more. Over 2,000 years ago, the famous physician Hippocrates, and he's among one of the most famous quotes is, all disease begins in the gut. And that is very true. Either is the sole responsible cause of it or is a great contributing factor to it. But nonetheless, all disease does begin in the gut, especially in our Western civilized modern culture. So let's get to a little bit of talk about the primer on gut. Okay. So gut health is influenced by two related variables, okay? The intestinal barrier and the gut microbiome, okay? Disturbances in either one of these can induce gut inflammation, incites a chain reaction of damage that begins locally and eventually will spread systemically throughout the body. That's just a fact. It's going to happen eventually. First one is the intestinal barrier. The intestinal barrier is a multi-layer system. It's made up of intestinal epithelial cells, proteins, protective mucus, and immune cells, okay? It prevents the passage of non-nutritive substances and pathogens from the gut lumen into the systemic circulation of our bodies. It also supports digestion and regulates our immunity. So the intestinal barrier is extremely important, and its integrity and health are to the utmost importance when we are seeking to reverse disease and or to protect our gut health and make sure it's functioning optimally. So the intestinal barrier, basically this seal, it's a seal, right, is a delicate and very easily disturbed by a variety of dietary and lifestyle factors. Okay, when intestinal barrier integrity is compromised, the little minuscule gaps open up between the epithelial cells, and they allow molecules to escape from the gut lumen into the systemic circulation of our bodies. Well, this condition is referred to as leaky gut, which everybody has pretty heard of. What this means is that it's called basically intestinal permeability. So in my field, leaky gut, we refer to it as intestinal permeability. Well, the leaky gut in turn will cause the body to launch an inflammatory responses both locally in the gut and systemically in distant tissues and organs in our bodies, and ultimately become, to cause problems. So the other influence, aside from the intestinal barrier, is the gut microbiota. So the human gut is a home to, as of now, what we have has been estimated and seen over 100 trillion different microorganisms and their gene sets. And this is about over 150 times greater than what our own is, how many cells we have in our bodies. So collectively referred to as the gut microbiota, these microbes and their genetic material influence literally every aspect of our health. It is a crucial driver of immune development and inflammatory balance, both locally in the gut and systemically in distant tissues and organs, again, in our bodies. So when people talk about dysbiosis, this means there's a disruption of the gut microbiota community by various stressors, okay, such as unhealthy diet, lifestyle changes, and also, chemicals and other environmental factors in our, system. So dysbiosis promotes gut inflammation, and if left unchecked, will contribute to the development, ultimately, of chronic disease such as inflammatory bowel disease or IBD, IBS, colon cancer, obesity, asthma, type 2 diabetes, you name it, it will cause that factor. So I'm not going to waste time, talk about research, talk about findings, or any of those intricate details. My goal is to be able to give you guys bottom line factors of the causative issues, what causes those, at least the major ones, and ultimately what to do to address that. Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about the 12 diet and lifestyle factors that can cause gut inflammation and damage. The first one is gluten. Okay, gluten has been beat to death again, but people still miss the boat. So for those with celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity, gluten does make a vital difference in the ability to heal the gut, and or if it's a healthy gut, to be able to begin to cause problems. The gluten proteins are the primary energy storage proteins of wheat, barley, and rye. They're localized in the endosperm of these grains. And so the gluten family encompasses a wide variety of proteins, including gliadins and glutenins and source aldehys. They're all collectively referred to as gluten. Gluten does cause inflammation in people with celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So celiac disease obviously is an autoimmune response to gluten that is marked by disruption of healthy intestinal tissue structures in the gastrointestinal system. It causes gastrointestinal distress and what's called extraintestinal symptoms such as rashes, anemia, and so forth. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity is characterized by intestinal and extraintestinal symptoms triggered by gluten in the absence of celiac disease and wheat allergy. Okay, not sensitivity, but allergy. So for many years, NCGS for short, was diagnosable only through a gluten elimination diet. However, innovative labs such as Cyrex labs now have made it possible for us to test for NCGS in the clinical setting very easily and very effectively. Gluten does trigger gut inflammation in susceptible individuals by binding to intestinal receptors and prompting them to release zonulin. Zonulin is a protein that facilitates the breakdown of tight junctions proteins between intestinal epithelial cells, increasing intestinal permeability, leaky gut, and causing gut inflammation. So gluten also activates the intestinal mast cells, which will release pro-inflammatory molecules such as histamine and tryptase and others that will perpetuate to gut inflammation. It is important for you guys to know that gluten doesn't cause inflammation in everybody. And that's a big debacle of things. But those without celiac disease or NCGS may be able to tolerate gluten in their diet if everything else is being equal. Also, I want to mention something that the most sources of gluten in our diet, in the United States at least, is not from a good source. Is from the semi-dwarf wheat strain that is mostly grown here, and that's processed that has been created. It's a form of genetic manipulation called mutagenesis, and the wheat proteins and the content is a lot higher, sometimes 300 to 400% more than the heritage heirloom, natural wheat that humans have grown up to pretty much eat. what we call biblical, wheat, acorn, organic acorn wheat, and so forth like that. So a lot of times, even if somebody doesn't have that allergy or gluten sensitivity or reaction to gluten, many times we are seeing, even though it's not measurable, that gluten content and amount in the diet will cause inflammation regardless. So best if you have any kind of gastrointestinal issues is to avoid gluten, or at least keep it to a minimum. The other thing is I'll very focus to only organic, certified organic gluten containing products, such as like Ezekiel breads or Alvarado Bakery, which are sprouted on top, make it more absorbable and digestible. However, anybody who is dealing with obesity, type 2 diabetes in general should eliminate gluten-containing foods. I don't care if they're organic, they're whole wheat or not, makes no difference. It really is something that is, best avoided, at least to a point until issues are resolved. I'm not going to get into a why, but that'll be a time for another seminar. Just take my advice, if you will, and avoid it. So gluten is number one. It's a big one because everybody's processed food and everybody's gluten, whether they realize it or not. The second huge factor that we're going to talk about is the industrial seed oils. You guys might have heard me talk about that quite a bit on my seminars or some of the podcasts that I've done, but industrial seed oils, they're highly processed, very highly refined, extracted oils from beans and seeds, such as soybeans, corn, rapeseed, the source of canola oil, cotton seeds, sunflower, and safflower seeds. These occupy the majority stake in the standard American diet. Okay, now you can look up the manufacturing, the processing of industrial seed oils. You're gonna have to kind of sort of have a food chemistry degree to be able to understand it, but ultimately, from start to finish, it's a completely different animal, completely different product. And these oils are extremely inflammatory. We call those metabolic poisons. Okay, and they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they're used everywhere. It doesn't matter if you go to a fast food place, if you go to a steakhouse, they're going to cook with those oils, they're going to use those oils to prepare the food directly or indirectly. And they are literally everywhere. I did a seminar on the content of those, and I believe I talked on podcasts quite a bit about that as well. But as I said, they occupy the absolute majority stake in the standard American diet. Introduced to the human diet literally a little bit less than 2 centuries ago, these oils represent literally an evolutionary mismatch and promote severe gut and overall systemic inflammation in the body. They have a tremendously high omega-6 fatty acid content. The fatty acids are not the natural, normal omega-6s that you might get from cold pressed olive oil or organic raw walnuts or nuts in general. They're high in omega-6s as well, but it's a completely different molecular structure. There's, I guess, something that the body doesn't recognize as food at all. So processing and using those oils, like cooking with them, they create oxidized inflammatory byproducts. When consumed, will induce GI inflammation. It's not if they will, it's the question is when they will and how bad. So indeed, a diet rich in these industrial seed oils has been proven time and time again to provoke gastrointestinal inflammation. So while also enhancing the growth of intestinal pathogens. That's another thing that we didn't know until fairly recently, that industrial seed oils will also somehow enhance the propagation and the thriving of certain gastrointestinal pathogens. And I see this all the time in the GI map test that I do, and some of those other functional testing that I do in my practice. So avoid at all costs all industrial seed oils. What do you use? Grass-fed butter, ghee, tallow, duck fat. You have good quality real, because very adulterated, avocado and real olive oils, macadamia nut oil. Again, there's so many more alternatives than the oils that you see. But processed food, if you're consuming any kind of processed food, look at the back package of Oreo cookies or anything, you're going to see somewhere a content of certain type of industrial seed oil. They're everywhere. You go to McDonald's, you order a hamburger, it's in the hamburger, it's on the hamburger because that's what cooking with is the fries that you order with. If you go get pizza, it's in the crust, it's on the crust, because these oils are literally everywhere. If you say, I have people ask me, well, I use organic canola, it doesn't matter. It makes zero difference whether it's organic or not. These are very highly refined oils. So even if you go to Whole Foods, and unfortunately, yeah, they sell them there, you're going to see organic canola oil, steer away from it, avoid it like the plague, literally. So don't say I didn't warn you. So number 2, industrial seed oils. Number 3, acellular carbohydrates. Acellular carbohydrate are carbohydrate-containing foods that lack cell walls. And this perfect example of that, which everybody consumes in the standard American diet, is flour. Like wheat flour, majority of the time, and sugars, processed sugars, so which come from cane, sugar canes. So these are what we call, aka, processed and highly refined foods. And thus, these foods have a very high carbohydrate density. And that's what makes them so dangerous. Like white bleached wheat flour is not only, the problem is there's a tremendous amount of gluten and gliadin content in there, but also it's a very dense, very high glycemic starch that causes problems, as everybody knows. So acellular carbohydrates, they're abound in the standard American diet everywhere, literally, and they promote inflammation in the gut and do damage the microbiota in the gut, okay, because that's what we're talking about today. Cellular carbohydrates, on the other hand, are carbohydrate-containing foods with intact cell walls, such as sweet potatoes, yams, potatoes, fruit. If you have cane sugar, cane, sugar cane, that's what I meant to say, you can chew that without a problem. You'll never have any problems with it, even though it's very sweet. So these are your, cellular carbohydrate, basically unprocessed foods. That's what it means. Unlike acellular carbohydrates, the cellular carbohydrates promote gut health, and they fuel the growth of anti-inflammatory gut bacteria and help the gut thrive. So avoid processed foods. Again, I know it's simple. I know that has been talked to death, and many, many great experts, a lot smarter than me, have spoken about that so long ago, and they currently are. But are you doing it? I ask yourself the question, are you doing? Okay, great. You're going to hear a good webinar, a seminar, you're going to read some good material, you're going to get excited, and you're going to go about your day, even though you agree with it, but are you doing it? This is the bottom line. Ask yourself a question, am I doing it? If you're not, then why not? If you want help, you have to do it. It's really simple as that. Discipline. Do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, how you're supposed to do it, whether you feel like it or not. Most of the times, we are not going to feel like doing it, but this is where habits are created. I always tell people, if you're going to wait on motivation to kick in, that's not going to happen. When people get started, usually they're motivated, and that's great, but that wears off. It's the day-to-day grind and the valley experiences is what really counts, and what changes, true changes, permanent life changes are made. Not on the mountaintops, not when you're flying high, you're motivated, and everything's going well, because that's a very short-lived scenario. So, avoid processed foods. All right, number 4, food additives. Again, nothing new here, nothing nobody has ever talked about before. Has not talked about before, that's what I meant to say. So, again, ultra-processed foods compromise nearly 65 to 70% of energy intake in the United States and are absolutely loaded with additives. You cannot have a processed food without additives. Just that's part of it. So most food additives have not undergone long-term safety studies. It's a troubling fact, because given the accumulating evidence of their harmful effects on the gut inflammation, is mind-boggling they have not. But additives make a lot of money. There's a lot of money in additives, directly and indirectly. So additives make food palatable. They make foods taste better. They make them last longer. They make them, look a certain way and keep that look. So, they're very valuable to a lot of, the big agro giants. people that produce processed food. So, perfect example, one additive that is really has become a staple, honestly, and a standard is maltodextrin. Maltodextrin. Look everywhere. I promise you're going to find it everywhere, including supplements and a lot of even health foods or so-called health foods. So maltodextrin, what is it? It's a synthetic carbohydrate that is used as a thickener and a preservative and a filler in processed foods. It enhances the adhesions of harmful bacteria to the intestinal cells very effectively and promotes biofilm formation. And we're not going to go into what a biofilm is. You can look it up, but it does great damage. It does, long-term especially. You're not going to feel it. You're not going to notice anything, but over time. Another additive, a type of additives is the artificial sweeteners, particularly a ubiquitous one, a very insidious one, is Splenda. It stimulates the growth of inflammatory gut bacteria. Carrageenan recently popularized, supposed to be natural additive, which is made out of seaweed, the grade, but again, it's very highly processed. It's a polysaccharide and is used for thickening and emulsifying properties of foods. So even some organic nut milks that are dairy-free milks or creamers will have it now. Stay away from that. It's not good for you. It does cause damage. Exacerbates, gut inflammation and causes changes in bacterial function and diversity. It does. People with IBD, ask anybody who pays attention, they're going to tell you, exacerbates symptomology, inflammatory bowel disease very badly. Another one is the carboxymethyl cellulose and polysorbate 80, which is pretty much everywhere. So these are two very ubiquitous food emulsifiers, and they increase intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut. It's a proven fact. Titanium dioxide, another whitening and brightening agent, provokes great inflammation and cytokine response in the gut. I mean, we can keep going on and on about food additives and their destructive properties, but to keep gut inflammation at bay and to reverse it, you have to avoid these ubiquitous foods and those additives. They're not foods, they're additives. Without fail. So that should be a top priority for you. Number 5, that's a touchy one here, but I'm going to spend a lot of time on it. And if you have had that, then there's no going back to that. So, don't worry about what you cannot control. But number 5 is C-section birth and formula feeding. C-section birth profoundly alters the development of the infant gut. Seeding the microbiome with microbial species derived from the surrounding environment rather than beneficial microbes from the mother's vaginal canal is essential. The first immunity is triggered by the natural passing of the vaginal canal. The second is when the baby latches to his or her first feed to the breast. Okay. Infants delivered via C-section are also exposed via the placental circulation, so no antibiotics. Antibiotics administered to their mothers to prevent prospective infection. Right there, there's another insult to injury right there. This early life antibiotic exposure further skews the infant's gut microbiota development and predisposes the child to gut inflammation and chronic inflammatory diseases, especially like asthma, obesity, and many other issues down the road. There's obviously a great debate on the autism epidemic that we're looking into it, but that is a big part of that as well, immune system. A lot of people, obviously blame vaccines for the autism. There's definitely a lot of evidence that point to potential dangers of vaccines to trigger autism. But ultimately, again, it boils down to the immune system, to the child's innate immune system. And if you don't have a strong immune system, a lot of things you can do that are going to damage that. As opposed to somebody who has a very strong, healthy, natural immune system, they're going to be able to handle a vaccine better. It's regardless whether they're effective or not. That's not a point of discussion here, but it's just the point is that it's not going to be able to have that kind of damage if they have a strong immune system, which started from birth. Okay. The other thing, as I said, in number 5 is formula feeding. Well, formula feeding is also a problem for fragile infant gut. Formula feeding promotes the growth of inflammatory gut bacteria, increases intestinal permeability, and total bacterial load. Conversely, breastfeeding increases colonization of the infant's gut with anti-inflammatory lactobacilli and bifidobacteria families, reducing the risk and right down eliminating the gut inflammation and chronic inflammatory diseases. So if any of you are about to be mothers or about to give birth, if you have a choice of doing a natural vaginal birth and breastfeeding, that is definitely the best option. C-section can be life-saving, and C-section was developed because of emergency, not to be the standard. Now it's like factory farming. I mean, everything is just like people schedule the birth literally down to the last minute. It's ridiculous. That's a whole other story, though. So anyway, C-section birth and formula feeding. Avoid it if you can. Number 6, GI infections, gut infections. I see these all the time. I use a test called the GI map. It's a DNA, qPCR stool test. It's one of the gold standard tests that is used. And I see subliminal gut infections all the time. Bacterial, viral, fungal, parasitic, you name it, it's there. And all these will enter the composition of the gut microbiota, creating literally a pro-inflammatory intestinal environment. For example, the influenza A virus transiently increases susceptibility to the Salmonella pathogen by reducing protective commensal bacteria, while H. pylori, which a lot of people have, estimated over 50% of the population of the world now have it present. But H. pylori infection enhances the growth of Protobacteria bacteria, which is a pro-inflammatory bacterium that is present. So that bacteria might be present, but it's, as long as low amounts and low quantities, is not a problem. But if it's enhanced and is allowed to grow and propagate, it will eventually cause, again, inflammation and damage ultimately to the gut. An acute bout of food poisoning, for example, can also trigger gut inflammation and irritable bowel syndrome by stimulating intestinal production of inflammatory antibodies, or what they call autoantibodies. And a lot of times after people have had the food poisoning and they're able to get rid of it, whether through medication or just naturally was able to go away with, they still have those bacteria a lot of times present. And over time, those bacterium, even though they're very subliminal, they're very low grade, they cause low grade inflammation. And under the right conditions, they can spur back up. And a lot of times the symptomology can be actually different than the initial acute poisoning and infection. And the symptoms are different as well, and can cause long-term damage. And again, that's something I see with people that I work with all the time. A lot of them have that. So if you're not sure, do a GI map. It's a simple stool test. They can tell you a lot. I'll talk about that a little bit after I finish. All right, number 7, stress. Well, that's really that's not like a no-brainer, but the human gut is acutely sensitive to chronic stress. Those saying you can't have happy thoughts on a sour stomach, well, that's literally true. So chronic psychological stress increases intestinal permeability and allows LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, and inflammatory bacterial byproducts to enter the blood circulation, thus causing both localized and systemic inflammation response. Stress will also deplete the protective GI mucus layer and increase bacterial adhesion and penetration into intestinal epithelial cells, provoking gut inflammation. That's why a lot of times people were connecting ulcers with stress. Well, they know that H. pylori causes ulcers. That's correct. But what you're not told is that when you have stress, you lower the immune system, you increase inflammatory response that allows the H. pylori to propagate, and the defense against the H. pylori present is either greatly diminished or completely eliminated, and that ultimately can lead to development of ulceration in the stomach or esophagus. So back to square one, stress. That's something that is very personal and very different for many people. There are certain things that we can't avoid, death of loved ones, also job stuff like that is not to our control, but at least try to remedy what you have control over. And even though, diet and healthy lifestyle, a lot of times is not going to take away that stress, but it's going to make you a lot more resilient to the chronic and long-term effect and damage of chronic stress. So even though you're not going to feel necessarily better, you're not going to function in a sense any better, depending on what kind of severe stress you have, or PTSD. But if you eat healthy and you build your body up, you're going to have a great defense against the long-term, devastating, oftentimes, effects of chronic stress. So, yeah, the stress itself you can't control, because very few of us really able to control many things. Pretty much nobody. Again, especially big things like, loss of loved ones or other calamities that are not within our control. But you ultimately make the choice what you eat and what you put into your mouth, and what environmental factors you control in your home to stay healthy and defend your body from damage. Number 8, sedentary lifestyle and overtraining. Well, sedentary lifestyle was really the only thing was talked about probably about, 15 years ago. And rightfully so, because most people with the luxury here in the United States and, our Western society, and, the physical manual labor's jobs were greatly diminished and decreased. So very few people did that. Even if you work on your feet, that didn't, it was not that much of a difference. And that's why, starting in the 70s, exercise became very greatly promoted nationwide on a large scale, and rightfully so. But sedentary lifestyle, I have to talk about, because everybody knows about that, the dangers of that. Okay, that's going to promote inflammation if you're sitting on your, on your desk all day long. But now we have a new problem, and the new problem is the overdoing of exercise. And a lot of people getting involved in things that are really made for professional athletes, or people who have, or made for athletic skills. Okay, perfect example of that is CrossFit. Okay, CrossFit in itself is not bad. It's a great movement. There's a lot of positive to it, but it's not for everybody. It's actually for very few, minority of people. People in general overdoing things. It can be just doing cardio in the gym, doing crazy HIIT training and all sorts of other stuff. And people really, really causing a lot of damage. That's usually mostly for younger adults. Even though older people, are engaged into it, but, continuous training, continuous pushing, considering you're not even, professional athlete or any kind of really athlete, causes problems, causes inflammation. So motor exercise, we all know it boosts actual beneficial gut bacteria. It's healthy for you. I mean, nobody's going to deny that, including anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acids, which inhibit inflammation, and many other positive aspects to it. But conversely, a sedentary lifestyle obviously is associated with increased infiltration of inflammation and other issues. And again, right behind that is the overdoing of exercise. Okay. And a lot of people think, wow, exercise is good, and in moderation, whatever moderation is for you, well, they think, well, if this is good, then more is better. And it's not better. It's actually worse. Okay, so excessive physical activity will increase intestinal permeability and negatively alters the gut microbiota. If you have a chronic inflammation, illness, or under significant psychological stress, you'll want to limit strenuous exercise by default and focus on gentler activities such as, walking, riding a bike, swimming, yoga, even if it's the exercise you're doing, to a lot less intensity. I personally, had to do this, and it was hard. I lost a parent, in a way that it was very unpleasant and unexpected. And I was in the middle of training, and that's a big part of my life is, working out with weights and, pushing cycles and doing, different performances with weights. And as much as it's fun and it's good for you and it's lovely, and as much as benefit I've always received from it, I really had to downregulate my intensity and my frequency, because the overall psychological stress was just too much, and my body started hurting, and I was struggling. And luckily, I had enough wisdom to understand that it's time to really downregulate my exercise intensity. So whoever watches this, I know a lot of you guys probably, are CrossFitters or, train hard and what have you not, but keep something in mind. If you have a lot of psychological stress, it's always good to downregulate. If you're in doubt, you'll never do worse than keep going. If anything, go the opposite and do less. So just keep that in mind, because that's something that is very hard to comprehend, because again, training is always associated with positiveness, with productivity, with health, vitality, and being part of a healthy overall lifestyle in the community, especially if you're doing it together. But overtraining will hurt you, and it will hurt your gut. With that being said, if you don't have psychological stress, everything's going, relatively speaking, well in your life, but you do have physical damage to your gut, especially people with Crohn's, IBD, more severe stuff, it is essential that you don't overtrain, because you will continue to damage the gut and exacerbate that condition without fail. So just keep that in mind. All right, we're almost done here. Number 9, circadian rhythm disruption and sleep loss. Well, that's been talked to death, but it's extremely important, because it's so easy nowadays not to sleep well and practice things that make you lose quality sleep. And even if you're sleeping 8-9 solid hours, that sleep quality might not be optimal. There's a difference between quantity and quality. So the circadian rhythm is a set of internal biochemical processes that occur approximately 24-hour cycles, and they regulate many aspects of your physiology, including the gut health and its inflammatory response. So the circadian rhythm is disturbed by factors such as evening blue light exposure, irregular sleep schedules. The gut health will suffer without fail. Okay, especially the guys that do graveyard shifts, third shifts, problems all the time. That's why I see a massive correlation between weight gain and even obesity with people who are chronic, third and off shifts like that. Circadian rhythm disruption has been found to promote the growth of inflammatory gut bacteria. It will decrease the beneficial microbes, the good guys, and will upregulate intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut, and LPS transporting to the systemic circulation of your body. Basically, no good. Sleep loss is directly linked to circadian rhythm disruption and is equally harmful to gut health. Just 2 nights of partial sleep deprivation will induce changes in the gut, and that has been, scientifically proven, has been, measured, has been witnessed. There's not an assumption, it's not a theory. So increasing, pro-inflammatory bacteria species will happen without fail when sleep is disturbed. Insufficient sleep also will exacerbate gut inflammation in IBD and Crohn's, again, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's ulcerative colitis. It will make things worse momentarily. So to minimize gut inflammation, support your circadian rhythm, and optimize your sleep. That is just crucial. Again, ask yourself, what can I do better to fix the sleep? I understand that this is going to happen overnight, but these are little changes that can take place little by little. All right, number 10, antibiotics. We have an epidemic of antibiotic overuse, and we're reaping the benefits. About 20 years ago, you started seeing MRSA with the methicillin resistance bacteria that but this is the least of it. The frequency with which doctors prescribe antibiotics has instilled a false sense of security. That has been a big problem, okay, in many patients. After all, your doctor wouldn't prescribe you a drug unless you really need it, right? Well, unfortunately, flipping what is called prescribing of antibiotics now is the norm in our society. Somebody sneezes the wrong way, call the doctor, hey, I'm gonna get you a Z-Pack. I mean, it's like taking like a vitamin or drink of water, and the effect of gut health completely, even though they know, tend to be still minimized and downregulated. Like give you something simple, like, well, just make sure you eat some yogurt or drink plenty of water. Like that's going to fix the damage from the antibiotic. You have to understand, abundant research indicates that antibiotics will have a long-term deleterious effect on the gut microbiota and will induce GI inflammation. There's no question to that. Okay, do your own research, you'll see it. So antibiotics, they'll reduce the diversity of the abundance of the commensal healthy gut bacteria, and the overgrowth of inflammatory pathogens such as C. diff, Clostridium difficile, and others will be allowed to propagate actually after the antibiotic has been discontinued. So these microbial changes can last for months or years, literally after cessation of the antibiotic. The adverse effects are most pronounced in infants and young children who yet have not developed fully, and who are going through a critical time window in their gut microbiome development. So think about very heavily before you use antibiotics. Unless it's something very serious, emergency situation, that's one thing, but there are so many more powerful and really good, if not better, alternatives that are broad spectrum antimicrobials that are very safe and effective, such as Mediterranean wild oil of oregano, the P73 by North American Urban Spice. And that's a phenomenal product, easy to use, not expensive, relatively speaking, and it's a broad spectrum antimicrobial. It wipes off pretty much anything. Olive leaf extract, berberine, caprylic acids, sodium caprolate. I mean, there's so many, they're so cheap, it's not even funny. But nonetheless, essential oils, that are, for ingestion and for, have broad spectrum, anti-microbial, fungal, anti-parasitic action. So try to use those as opposed to just going to an antibiotic, first case. So alarmingly, the other thing is that antibiotic-resistant bacteria have been found to morph into more inflammatory versions of themselves upon exposure to antibiotics. And that's why you have this start seeing this resistance. There is pretty much ubiquitous everywhere. Antibiotic use also increased intestinal permeability and thus reducing the gut's natural immune defense. It has been said numerous times, and you guys have heard it, that, estimated 70-80% of the gut mediates the immune response in the body. That's very true. So why would you want to damage that, right? Antibiotic treatment does directly will promote also gut inflammation. So antibiotics, unless absolutely necessary, try to steer clear. The other, number 11, is non-antibiotic drugs, prescription or over-the-counter. Very, very unfortunately, very few clinicians consider the impact of non-antibiotic drugs on their patients and their gut health, before putting them on those, medications. Again, over-the-counter or prescription, doesn't matter. Massive growth of, body of evidence has indicated that this is significant oversight, that multiple classes of non-antibiotic drugs will alter the gut microbiota, induce gut inflammation. The biggest three ones are your PPIs, or proton pump inhibitors. These are used for treatment of gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, basically acid reflux, and they'll decrease the stomach acid. Well, here's the problem with that. When the stomach, produces sufficient acid, bacterial and otherwise other pathogen entry from the environment to the gut is greatly limited, and that's why we have the acid that we do have. Dogs, for example, have tremendously stronger acid than we do. That's why they can pretty much eat anything they want. Then most of them have a problem. So that's limited, it's inhibited. The last thing you want to do. So by inhibiting the stomach acid production, or its strength, or its molality that is called, PPIs will allow more bacteria to enter the digestive tract and proliferate in the small intestine, inducing bacterial overgrowth and gut inflammation. So a lot of people have heard of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Well, that's a big cause of that. They also reduce the growth of anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids, or the bacteria that produce them. They damage the gut, bottom line. So avoid it. And there's, again, fix your diet and your gut will go away. Simple as that. The other ones that are not really well known and have a more of a chronic effect is the SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, aka antidepressant medications. And they're known to cause, obviously, constipation and appetite changes. Preclinical studies have indicated many times that, for example, the Prozac or fluoxetine, I believe that's how it's called, alters the gut microbiota and community and the actual structures, increasing at the same time dysbiotic gut bacteria. So what happens? Bad for the gut. Oral contraceptives, bad ones. Those also trigger gut inflammation. In fact, their use is directly associated with increased risk of Crohn's disease and subtype of inflammatory bowel disease. That's not going to happen after a few months or even a year or two of use, but prolonged use, it definitely happens. And again, these are, studies that are there, proof has been, accomplished. It's not really a theory. So number 12, the last one, is environmental toxins. Well, thousands of new chemicals are developed by industries every year. We know that. In the United States, most of these chemicals do not undergo comprehensive safety testing analysis before they're actually released for use or general use. This fact is alarming because considering the host of adverse health effects linked to existing chemicals in our environment, it's bad. I mean, you guys, all of you know that. Environmental toxins are everywhere. I do testing. I have especially a urinary test that I do for over 200 different environmental chemicals that are used in regular household and daily lives, not in the heavy industries, but actually people's daily lives. They're approved, and everybody's got people loaded all the time, and none of them work in factories or certain chemical places where they can get exposure very readily and easily, but no, just daily lives. So, they do. They cause a lot of problems. And gut inflammation is one of the most frequently cited consequences, actually, of exposure to environmental toxin. So, BPA or bisphenol A, which everybody knows again, is found in plastic water bottles and food containers. That's why I see BPA-free stuff all the time. Children's toys, cash register receipts, and many others. But these promote inflammation, and actually BPA will increase harmful bacteria and will cause leaky gut, aka intestinal permeability. Alternative plasticizers, like found in BPA-free products, believe it or not, are equally, if not more, damaging because they took out BPA, but the other bisphenol chemicals, which can many, are not tested. So they're also producing problems. It just doesn't stop. So one of the best ways is use stainless steel, ceramic, or glass. Simple as that. Okay. Some good quality silicone products can also be, used with relatively safety, but stainless steel, ceramic, and glass is your absolutely best bet. Especially glass that is pure silicate, silicone I think it's silicate borate. I'm not sure, but that's the purest glass that you can get. So switch to that. My wife and I, that's all we use. We use glass. It's a little stainless steel, and everything else is just glass. Okay, and everybody makes this. One of the best ways to eliminate plasticizers and those types of environmental chemicals out of your system. Also, when you get your receipts from the cash register, unless you need the receipt, either have it emailed to you or just tell the cashier to throw it away. You don't need the receipt. And if you do, handle it with care and don't try to touch it, rub it in your hands, because it does permeate through your skin. Triclosan is a very popular chemical. It's being used and is still used everywhere. That's any microbial or antibacterial soap, lotion, product will contain that. It's a synthetic antibacterial agent and is used in hand sanitizers and personal care products everywhere. So this increases intestinal inflammation. Okay, bottom line. Glyphosate, the main constituent in Roundup, that too is a main component, again, Roundup herbicide particularly, but that decreases lactobacillus bacteria in the gut and facilitates the growth of antibiotic-resistant E. coli bacterial strains, making glyphosate act as actually an antibiotic in the gut microbiome. And that has been known for over 30 years by their own scientists, actually, that there's, glyphosate alters, gut bacteria and causes inflammation and other problems. So avoid these. Simple. How do you do that? Well, buy certified organic food. You having glyphosate on your food from organic produce and food in general is highly unlikely. So at least it's very greatly decreased. The other thing is again, buy organic, even if you buy grains, because glyphosate is used as a desiccant. So it's sprayed on crops for elimination of mold, as well as desiccating, meaning that they can dry them out so they can be harvested on time. But avoid it. All right. We can talk about here for a long time, but guys, these are real things that need to be addressed. And unless you do, you are going to pay a price. Okay. And the older you get, the more problems are going to become to happen and the harder it's become to address. But everything that I mentioned, these things are, aside from the C-section and the breastfeeding formula, it's not hard to do. Okay. Let me go over real quick of the 12 consequences of intestinal inflammation. Okay. The biggest ones are going to be allergies. Okay. Gut inflammation is definitely the root cause of many allergies, including seasonal allergies. Okay. It's an imbalance between beneficial and harmful gut microbiome, and we increase the pro-inflammatory cytokines in the gut. And that will cause ultimately, a reaction. So on the other hand, the healthy gut, on the other hand, will inhibit, allergic sensitization to the release of anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids and immune balancing T regulatory cells. So what's the bottom line? Fix your gut. Okay, get healthy gut. Very important. Number 2, autoimmune diseases. Everybody's got them nowadays. You all know that, okay? Gut inflammation, it is the preceding factor in the development of autoimmune disease. Individuals with type 1 diabetes, for example, demonstrate higher circulating level of lipopolysaccharides compared to individuals without diabetes, which is very, very strong inflammatory, particles. Zonulin, like we talked about, that opens up the tight junctions and causes leaky gut. That too. Yeah, it's definitely higher in people with autoimmune disease compared to healthy control groups, denoting again the role of leaky gut in autoimmune disease. Gluten sensitivity and chronic stress are the 2 triggers of gut inflammation that often precede autoimmunity, therefore by doing it by damaging the gut. Like we talked about this, right? Number 3, arthritis. Inflammatory alterations in the oral and the gut microbiota will, including overgrowth of the carcinogenic bacterium Porphyromonas gingivalis, if I'm pronouncing this right, and decreased commensal bacteria, or the good bacteria, is associated with progression of arthritis. Dysbiosis in leaky gut will induce a systemic inflammatory response, triggering the release of cytokines that cause musculoskeletal degeneration. Okay, so if somebody has a genetic propensity for that, well, guess what? It's you're going to get arthritis. On the other hand, anti-inflammatory commensal bacteria and the short-chain fatty acids, they have been found to alleviate, and in many cases, reverse arthritis. It's obviously a lot easier to prevent arthritis, but nonetheless, at least it can greatly, help it. So fix the gut. Okay, fix the gut. Number 4, cardiovascular disease. Well, to this day, unfortunately, with all the statins and all the medications and procedures we have, it is still the leading cause of death worldwide. And the medication and surgery are definitely the cornerstone of conventional medical treatment. However, growing evidence of the link between the gut and the heart health suggests that gut-targeted therapies may be the treatment of the future CVD, lifestyle and diet, and we all know that. By the way, your oral microbiome is directly related to your gut microbiome as well. So that's very important. If you have infections, cavitation, necrosis in the mouth, bad teeth, infected teeth, this has to be addressed because oral health will affect the GI health without fail. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people have periodontal disease, and the same principles that are applied in the gut will apply to the oral microbiome. Okay. The GI disorders are obvious, but IBD and IBS, colorectal cancer, and diverticulitis are obviously the causes of gut inflammation. Number 6, we briefly talked about is, depression and anxiety. You have a lot of emerging evidence and research indicating the immune system activation plays a central role in the development of depression and anxiety. The human gut harbors approximately, again, 70 to 80% of the immune system, depending on who you listen to, but it's no surprise that gut inflammation significantly will impact mental health. Do not be deceived. Psychological trauma in childhood, trauma in general, absolutely can and will lead to that. But also, do not discount the physical causative factors. And as I said before, it's better for you to have a PTSD, for example, some kind of mental trauma. They have anxiety and depression, and have a healthy body, physically healthy body, than to have that and have a physically unhealthy body that is causing problems. And by default, when you have a healthy body, even though the depression and anxiety is not going to go away, it can be greatly reduced, or at least a lot more manageable and tolerable. And at the same time, again, you're not causing physical damage. So you can't go wrong by fixing the gut, regardless if the causative factor of anxiety and depression was a psychological trigger. Okay. And also, please be careful. People have talked or have presented things like, well, if you fix your gut, you're going to fix the anxiety and depression. That is not necessarily the case at all, because if the cause is physical from gut damage, like I presented here, then yes, you'll be able to address depression and anxiety. But nowadays, most often, it's either a combination of both, but oftentimes people have tremendous amount of trauma and hurt from psychological experiences that are causing that. So you fixing anything with the gut, it might not do anything with or let alone fix everything with anxiety, depression. So that's a very, very dangerous thing to assume that if you fix everything physically, the depression and anxiety is going to go away. It can help it. It can definitely alleviate it. You'll be better off regardless, but it's not necessarily going to go away if that's not the cause. So just be careful with that. I mean, the gut-brain axis, it's a bidirectional signaling network, and the entire nervous system of the gut is the central nervous system. It mediates the relationship between the gut, inflammation, and mental health. So remember, it's a bidirectional system. That's all saying. Regardless of the causes, you're always better off addressing the physical aspect that you have control, because you do control what you eat, you do control what kind of lifestyle you live to a point, and still, have in the other side, it will be better regardless. But enough of that. So number 7 will be neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, MS, ALS, directly gut-to-gut inflammation. Okay, directly. It might be because big causative factor, or might be a big contributing factor, but regardless, it is associated very heavily. So address the gut to protect yourself from neurodegenerative disease. Neurodevelopmental disorders, that's another one, and that's a touchy subject for a lot of people, especially with children. But again, you're going to be able to really make a big difference in the child's health if you control the diet and the lifestyle. Okay, and that can be PANDAS, that can be PANS, that can be ADHD, ADD, you name it. But it's very important to really address the gut. Number 9, osteoporosis. A lot of evidence points to gut inflammation that promotes osteoporosis by disrupting the balance between the bone building and bone resorbing cells, leading to a net loss of bone mass. Gut inflammation also will decrease by default the absorption of critical bone building nutrients such as vitamin D, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, vitamin K1, K2, vitamin A, vitamin E complexes, all these. Combine that with a standard American diet, which most people are deficient or have a subliminal deficiency or subclinical deficiency by default, you're even exacerbating that by having a damaged gut that prevents or drastically decreases the ability to absorb and assimilate those micronutrients. So osteoporosis, fix the gut. Okay. Skin conditions, that's a big one. I see it all the time. Okay. It's massive amount of link between gut health and function and the skin. So the gut-brain axis, the gut-skin axis, you might have heard it. It's a network of signaling molecules that connect the gut and its microbes with the skin. Inflammatory changes in the gut, including dysbiosis and increased intestinal permeability, are linked directly to a spectrum of skin conditions, including acne, psoriasis, rosacea, eczema, and so on, without fail. It's always the case. Again, you see it all the time. Number 11, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. No need to go into that detail, but fixing the gut is the first step. And you do that by what? Addressing the diet, removing processed food, studying nutritious foods. Number 12, that's a very popular one now, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the NAFLD. This is an accumulation of excess fat in the liver in people who consume little or no alcohol. So you can't say it's alcoholic liver disease because those people don't drink alcohol. And this is closely related to metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. And a compromised gut microbiota and inflammation will drive NAFLD without fail. So whereas beneficial, good, targeted therapies such as probiotics, alleviation of stress, addressing healthy anti-inflammatory diet will reverse that. NAFLD is very easily reversible, very quickly too. 6 to 9 months at tops, you can completely reverse that. So ultimate question again is, how do you correct gut inflammation? Because that's what we talked about. Gut inflammation, how do you reverse that? First and foremost, without fail, the absolute most powerful weapon that you have, that is your diet, what you put into your mouth. Very simple. People start to beat things to death, and people experience what's called paralysis from over-analysis, and I see it all the time. Do I do keto? Do I get full-blown keto? Well, what is keto? Well, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Is it paleo? Is it, this diet? Is that diet? Is those foods? These foods? It is very simple. If you don't have, first of all, the optimal way to do it is get tested. Know what's going on in your gut. What dysbiosis do you have? If you have dysbiosis, what needs to be fixed? Do you have pathogens? Now, if you do, then you have to address the pathogens. If you don't, that's a step you don't have to worry about. Do you have inflammation? Where is that inflammation coming from? What is the inflammation? Do you have digestive sufficiency, like enzymes? If you don't, then that needs to be addressed. And ultimately, do you have food sensitivities? I didn't say allergies, I said food sensitivities, which will drive that inflammation. Okay. So that is the best way to go for. Don't guess, test. Do testing, know exactly where you stand, and go from there. But ultimately, regardless, it's going to be your diet. Diet is number one. That is the most powerful weapon. If you don't have the ability to work with somebody, if you don't have the money for testing, or don't know anybody who does testing, then again, it's diet. Eat unprocessed, natural, wholesome, preferably organic food, and you will not go wrong. It might not be the most optimal diet for you at the time, based on food sensitivities and things like that. Nonetheless, you're going to get there, because now you go in the right direction. All right. Think of it as testing, having a little laser focus, and you hit the bullseye from number one, from the get-go. That's your perfect diet for you, perfect supplemental protocol for you. And you're going straight, and you're doing this in the optimal amount of time, in the optimal way possible. Not having testing, not having somebody to work with, is kind of like a pinball machine. If you're really good at it, you're going to bounce around a little bit. Nonetheless, now you have a target, and you're going for the target. Eventually, you're going to hit it, and you're going to get there. It might take you a lot longer, but you'll get there. So what I'm trying to say is, fix your diet. Number one, remove what I said in those 12 aspects, and start eating high nutrient dense fruits, vegetables, lean quality meats that are, again, pasture, organic, raised, eggs that are pasture, organic raised, preferably that are fed, not fed, I mean soy or corn. There's many places now that sell them. They're soy free, or at least soy and corn free, pasture organic eggs. Same with the meat. Okay. Seafood, wild caught, good quality food. Stick to the low mercury, low heavy metal fish. Wild Alaskan salmon, sardines, anchovy, herring, mackerel, cod. Stay away from swordfish and tuna and grouper, which are very high in methyl mercury. But nonetheless, your diet is number one. That is removing the processed food. Okay, that's going to be very hard for all of you, because they're severely addicted foods, and you are addicted. That's a step that you have to appreciate and realize, and admit to yourself that I am addicted to food. Okay, it's not carbohydrates that you're craving. Okay, people come up and say, I'm really craving carbs. You're not. You're craving processed foods. Because I can give you 300 grams of, French fries or cookies or bread or pasta or pizza, and I can give you 900 grams of carbohydrates from organic white rice and steamed organic yams and sweet potatoes, and you're going to still crave the same thing, because you're not addicted to carbs, you're addicted to processed food. Okay, so I'll eliminate processed food, start eating high quality, nutrient dense foods. It is really that simple, and you'll get that, I promise you. Address your lifestyle, control what you can control, Don't worry about what you cannot control. Eliminate stress. Start drinking pure water. Okay, there's no substitution. Okay, pure water. You like coffee, you like tea, make sure they're organic. But it's fine. But water. Sleep. Address your sleep. These are lifestyle habits that are extremely simple, yet extremely hard to do because people have very faulty living habits. And the consequences is from wrong living habits ultimately, okay, that we've picked up as we grew up. So that is it for today. We went over, unfortunately, but I had a lot to say. It was very important. And I urge you guys to really take care of your health. If you guys want guidance, assistance, direction, contact me. That's what I do. That's what I'm here for. We can start with 2 simple tests. They're very convenient in-home testing. One of them is a finger prick test, and the other one is a stool test done in the comfort of your own home. And we can get you and point you in the right direction to address gut health and get you going when you're well on your road to health and vitality. So I hope you guys doing well. Stay strong, be diligent, be disciplined. Don't give up. If you fall down, you get right back up. People always ask me, what is the formula for success? What is the secret? There is no secret. There's no formula. But the fact is that the people that don't give up and keep going and get themselves up, regardless how many times they fail, and keep moving forward, are the ones that ultimately succeed. So that's it for today. I hope you guys have a phenomenal day. Thank you for listening to me. And I'll see you guys next time with more information.